issues, and ended up losing my first marriage to someone who escaped, and she should have. I just didn't know really what I was doing. I didn't have a lot of good developmental skills. I kind of missed that in my upbringing, and I became really intrigued on how the development of a person, especially the cognitive and the spiritual development of a human, really ended up impacting their ability even to enjoy a life that everybody dreams about. It wasn't whether they want it or not. It's can you do it? And in my case, it was really tricky. I was late for almost all of those milestones, including a second marriage and children and all of that, because it was just this lack of development. And I opened the Bridge Recovery Center trying to help other people say, look, you're not broken. There are developmental issues that you're probably missing, whether it's physical or intimate or spiritual or nutritional or psychological or emotional or whatever. And these pieces in your life that lack development are probably what's causing the most of your grief and your misery. And, people would be like, are you telling me that I'm doing this to myself? And you're like, well, kinda, I mean, I know you're not trying to, that's not the message, but the message is that you also can make an adjustment. You don't have to keep this identity. You don't have to. And that became this crazy, amazing journey. And Adrian, that's where you and I met. And it's just been this wild ride of kind of figuring out my own developmental pieces and also watching others and learning. I learn as much from the patients that come through the program and the patients in my regular practice as I ever have in any school or anything official. I really learn by watching other people improve. And we have this statement at the Bridge, like, did you come here to prove or did you come here to improve? And I know that sounds super cheesy, but a lot of people go to appointments and go to addiction programs just to prove how messy they are subconsciously. They don't really go to get better. I mean, they go to actually present the mess rather than to overcome it. So that's a lot of talking, but I've had this wild ride of chronic illness, chronic cycles. Most depression is over medicated and has some addiction component to it. Most anxiety that is really severe is over medicated and has an addictive component to it. Most really severe psychological disturbance has an addictive chemical component because most providers really don't know what else to do. It's like, I can see you in front of me. I know you're unsafe. I'm worried for you. Let's numb you at least something, let's give you something. And then that starts this process. This person, comes in, and myself included, you going, oh my gosh, that feels better. Well, awesome. Well, then what happens? It wears off. Well, oh no, what do I do now? Well, I want to feel better again. And then it wears off. And oh no, what do I do again? It's just this wild quest for relief. And if there's anything, I can hopefully help with today, just to start off, it's this quest for relief is insatiable. It doesn't work. It lasts a lifetime. You never get better. It's the quest for development that really starts making a huge difference in people. And making that shift is paramount. So yeah, I said I wouldn't talk a lot. I did, but
No, that's good. I want to just say, it's interesting. We talked about you were thinking about being a human and being in a zoo exhibit, and what would it take to keep a human organism happy? And it reminds me, we're getting into the modern understanding modern addiction. It reminds me of the experiment that was done with the rats when they were just given a choice of cocaine water and regular water. When they figured out it was cocaine water, they hid it till they died.
yeah,
When they put the cocaine water, the water, and a habit trail, they didn't even go to the cocaine water. They were too busy in the habit trail.
yeah, so interesting. So interesting. There's another fairly new study that's fascinating to me, and I think something that I've missed a bit over the years. Well, I'll tell you, when we first opened the program, I measured out all the ounces of food. Everybody was monitored. We had cameras everywhere. I mean, it was a lot of control. And I dropped, I think, our second group. This is back in 2000. I dropped our second group off at the airport ever, and they had good results. And I'd forgotten something in the airport, so I ran back into the airport to grab it. And I walked into the airport, and every single one of those guests that had come through the program were mobbing the vending machines, just emptying them of all of the treats as fast as they could. And I was like, oh no, like we had such good results, and here are these people like, hammering through all these treats. And I thought, oh, and I didn't say a word. I just kind of backed up and I got back in the van very, very quiet. And I thought, dang it, like I've missed this. I've missed this piece where if you don't really mean it on the inside, if somebody's trying to mean it for you, it doesn't work very well. So this agency piece, this freedom piece. So now doors are open, you keep your shoelaces and your cell phones, and I mean, you can rent an Uber, go to dinner if you want to. It's very, very breezy, and it works a lot better. This latest little study that I read. So there are these rats that they had, and both extremely stressed out. Both had some chemicals added to them, and there was a wheel on each side of the cage. And one rat was contained in the wheel; it couldn't leave the wheel. It got the same amount of food, the same amount of water. The other rat got to exercise when it wanted, but when it wanted to get on its wheel, it forced the other rat to exercise with it. And when it would get off, the other rat would get to rest. But then one rat, every time it chose to exercise, the other would be forced to exercise with this. So one rat had agency and the other rat did not. And they were doing these amazing scans and chemistry draws on these little animals, and found out that the simple fact of being coerced was dramatic. It was so devastating.
Mhm.
And the health and the recovery and the psychological stress and the problems and the disease, that I mean, they died way sooner, and they had all kinds of issues. And I thought, man, as we talk about this changing face of recovery, I mean, as we lead into this, and Adrian, you and I have talked about this before, we've got to lead into this and sit these beautiful people down and say, look, do you mean it? Is
Yeah.
this coming from you? Can you see the mess you're making? Let's at least start there. Are you able to associate the things that you've never wanted with the way that you think and your behavior and this identity? Oh yeah, I can kind of see that. Do you want out? Well, my wife says I do. Well, okay, but
Mhm.
let's help you want that first. And I'm not saying send them home until they're ready. A lot of those people will die. Don't do that. I'm saying that the prep for the addiction recovery has got to be, let's get you into this space first where it's coming from you, at least partially. It's got to be something that you're like, yeah, I can see, unless I really choose into this, me all by myself, that it's not going to work well. So, I mean, I know we're going to talk about a lot of things, but this has been something even more recent. I learned it like the second
Yeah.
session of the program 25 years ago, but now the more I let people really get involved in the recovery and choose their program, and we talk about med reductions and chemical reductions, and they pick the titration schedules now. I don't ever say, well, this is I now, and this has gone on for years. I say, you pick. Well, what's safe? I said, it's safe medically to ditch it all, but you're going to have a really crappy couple of days. Oh, I don't want to do that. Well, then let's not. Do you want to take 5 years and go down a half a milligram? No, I don't want to do that either. Well, then let's do something, you know, and we'll usually go 3 to 5 to 10 to 12 to 14 days, something like that. But as we address the human, I think better than we ever have in this addiction cycle. And we talk about the addiction to self, the addiction to trauma, the addiction to trauma, the addiction to stress or anxiety or sleeplessness or bad relationships. I mean, then you start getting a much better idea of why someone's taking a substance. It's, to me, yeah, why do they take substances? Why do any of us take substances? Why do I eat a Twinkie, twice a year, whatever? It's because it tastes good, or it feels good, or it gives me a break. But if you build your life around relief, that quest for relief, you'll never ever find value or purpose. You'll never get real relief
And you're
either.
never going to get the relief.
You never
You'll
get the
never
relief
get the
either.
relief,
Yeah.
right?
So it's like,
So it's like
has
we
help
talked
help help.
about though,
Go ahead.
that the people they don't want to get well. They when when you're first asked, do you want to be well? It's like, oh yeah, I want to be well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, here's what you're going to have to do. And then people are like, well, I'm not sure then. Talk for a little bit about, we know about the dangerous substances, particularly we're hearing about it on the news every day. Um, we're watching addiction morph into something different now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's behavioral, it's
yeah. And it,
substances, it's escapism, right?
yeah. And it's this, to me, and I don't want to make this huge, doom and gloom statement, but our society is becoming so much more interested in this fleeting emotional state of people. And we're respecting it in some ways that I think is really dangerous. It's like, oh my gosh, you're sad. Let's fix that right now.
Yeah.
Oh, somebody offended you. Oh, let's fix. No, that's no. Let's kill that right now. And like rather than what are you contributing to your life and the way you think and the way you feel and your reactions and all of that kind of the old school wisdom. It's being replaced with you should never be offended, you should never feel bad,
Right.
you should never be sad, you should never not have whatever you want, and heaven forbid somebody should say something or do something that would trigger you, all these pieces. And so now you have vast numbers of people seeking out new substances for that really quick, really fast, pretty euphoric feeling that I think I mean, unfortunately, we're telling they deserve. You deserve to feel this way.
Yeah.
How do you feel? Well, oh, it's way better than it was my depression. Oh, I see, that's what I'm talking. Oh, it's off, but then it wears off.
Yeah. It
Then
does.
it wears off.
It wears off.
It
And
wears off, and
yeah,
it's like, well, now what? Well, give me another piece. And that's why you see these designer drugs. And it's not just fentanyl. Fentanyl's now laced. It wasn't just marijuana. Marijuana got laced, and it wasn't just coke, then it was crack. And I mean, it wasn't just heroin. Now it's everything is the dark people that are enslaving these people seeking relief are very, very smart.
yes,
They
they are.
watch they watch trends, they watch pricing, they watch availability, they watch the police force, they watch testing, they watch all of that, and they're custom designing more and more slick pieces of chemistry to give people that false sense of relief. And now we're in this embroiled, like, I mean, it's getting kind of crazy.
It,
And
it really is. Talk a little bit about, when someone is taking drugs or using dangerous behaviors, because that all just starts chemicals going in your brain, which is just another substance,
correct.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so it's all substance, but people think it's behavior. Talk
Yeah.
a little bit about when the dopamine cycle, and clearly it's hard to get through withdrawal because your dopamine is all dysregulated. You can't regulate your own dopamine because there was other sources of dopamine coming in, and your body said, well, we must not need to produce dopamine.
Right.
Oh, you stop that, and what happens?
Yeah, crazy. So we my first lecture series at the bridge, I have this life-size skeleton, and I have a whole bunch of discarded IV poles from the hospital from my stint in internal medicine. And so I have all these IV poles around the skeleton, all with bags hanging on them. And I have all of these bags and tubes dripping into this skeleton. And I label them, like they normally would be at a hospital, like, antibiotics, saline, Ringer's lactate, um, pain management, and on and on and on. And people are like, yeah, that sounds right. And we talk about the effect of those chemicals dripping into this meat suit. I don't call it a person or a body. I call it a meat suit now because it really helps people separate them from this meat suit they're dragging around. And if you get confused about whether you're a meat suit or an observer, you can get into a lot of trouble. Well, I am depressed. Aren't you feeling depressed? No, I am anxious. I am addicted. I can't stop. I can't sleep. I am. that identity kind of confusion with that, with the difficulty, with those addictive practices is really tricky. So we talk about that a bit, and everybody's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I turn the bags over and I write on the other side, insecurity, don't feel attractive. I'll never make it. I'll never reach my potential. And people say, what is that? I said, what does that drip in?
Mhm.
And people sit there like, oh yeah, like your brain is already mixing biochem and dripping it into your cells to give you an experience that makes sense. And you can't lie. We've known we've known for over 100 years now that polygraph tests are real, and your body is more honest than your brain, right? Than your mind, than especially the conscious. And so when you're not integrous and when you're not dead straight honest, your meat suit actually reacts back at those thoughts saying, Daren, that's not true. And that doesn't mean, did you steal a cookie? No, I didn't. Yeah, he's a liar. It's I'm not attractive. Well, that's not true. I'm not going to make it. That's not true. I don't feel like I'm smart enough. That's not true.
Right.
Those are the untruths that in addictive patterns cause that chase after the relief. It's not necessarily I wake up in the morning and just like you said, I don't wake up in the morning going, oh my gosh, I need heroin, but we might say, or fentanyl or fast food or Netflix or whatever, or porn or gambling, or it's I wake up with this vacancy that I don't understand, and I don't have the development to fill it, so I've got to go outside. And dopamine's not a bad, I mean, whether you're running whitewater rapids or whether you're binge watching Netflix or eating a full pizza or whatever, like there's all kinds of ways that people try to fill that gap, but because it's not focused on development, it's insatiable. You can't. You just switch substances. You go from cigarettes to alcohol, and then back to coffee, and then back over to energy drinks. Then you get rid of all that, and then you get in a bad relationship, and then I mean, it's just
Yeah.
it's
Well, and
very
we always say like feelings aren't facts. You can't go to the emergency room and say, Doc, you gotta help me. My Netflix show, my account's been canceled. I'm gonna die.
right.
You know,
Yeah,
and the doctor's gonna go, no, you're not gonna die. You might feel like you're gonna die.
right.
You're
And
not gonna explode.
yeah, I drove myself to the ER. I mean, after my wife left and I climbed into bed, I was working, some shifts at a crappy restaurant and just kind of surviving, kind of hanging in there. I had this panic attack. I drove to the ER. I'm like, I'm dying, I swear, and of course, they run troponins, they draw my blood, and this brilliant old doc comes in and he goes, hey, give this gentleman vitamin A immediately. And I'm like, what? And the nurse, yeah, right, I'm on it. So she runs in and injects something into my little tube. And about 15 minutes later, I'm like, oh, wow. Like, that's amazing. And I later learned that in that little ER, it was a small town hospital, that vitamin A was code for Ativan. And that was my deficiency, right? Is that I just was so anxious that that taught me too, man, while somebody's in a substance, while they're desperate on that edge, be awfully careful about shaming or getting rid of that too early, because if you're not ready to help a man build a new house, don't burn his house down, or you're going to create this problem of this person that is just feels bad and feels guilty but doesn't have any life skills to pull off this new life. So you can jam somebody into like no substance. You can actually put them in jail and get all of their drugs away. But if you don't get into the mind and you don't get into the identity and you don't get into the depth of why and where that need comes from, I mean, you'll keep that person in trouble. I want to make this one more point before I forget, but I also, starting the bridge, we worked with this brilliant qigong master, and we're going through these motions. For those of you that don't know about qigong, it is an ancient Chinese healing art, but it uses movement to actually elicit changes in the mind and the body. It's actually movement to produce healing. Kind of yoga, kind of tai chi, but this is more a prescription that you would go to a qigong master to get a prescription for healing. So we just started a couple of movements, these really beautiful, like these really cool movements. And I developed this wild headache on the right side of my face and in the back of my brain. And it just pounded, and my eyes started to water and weep, my right eye. And I'm like, oh my gosh, holy cow. And she goes, what's going on? I said, I don't know, but just a couple of these movements, I have this crazy headache. And I said, I'll be right back. She had this, I'll slaughter her accent, but I gotta try. She says, Daren, where are you going? And I'm like, I'm gonna go chew up some Tylenol and ibuprofen. I'll be right back. I don't want to miss this, but the pain is just excruciating. And she goes, what? I'm like, I'm gonna go chew up some Tylenol. And so I went again, and she grabbed my hand and she pulled me back, and she put my face, like she grabbed my face and put me right up to her face, and she says, Darren, if only headaches were Tylenol deficiencies. And I was like, whoa. She said, are you deficient in Tylenol? I'm like, well, no,
Yeah.
no one's deficient in Tylenol, right? But I got this rush of, is depression an SSRI deficiency? Is sleep an Ambien deficiency, right? Is pain an opiate deficiency? Right? Is depression a substance deficiency? Is anxiety a fentanyl deficiency? No, it's not. It's
No.
not even. It's not even remotely like that. We have these deficiencies in development, but then we load in these cheap substances. But while we're dealing with these beautiful people, as our society gets more complicated and more complex, we have more complex humans coming in saying, look, I'm a principal at a elementary school. I can't get off this stuff. And
Right.
rather than say, holy cow, you're endangering all these children, we say, what's going on with you?
Yeah.
Like,
Right. What's
right? Like,
happening?
where's this pain coming from? What's happening? Forget the fentanyl. Like, I'm not interested in fentanyl. I want to know why.
Right. The root cause.
Why? Yeah. What's this hole in your system you're medicating? Like, let's talk about that. And then people look, you don't care about the fentanyl. I could give a rat's about fentanyl. I want to know what it is about the way you see yourself in the world that makes this an option and actually is giving you some relief. Where's this coming from? And man, then the tears come and like, oh geez, and then you've got a discussion, then you've got engagement, then you've got some sincerity, and then you can really move through that. So in my little corner of the world, I've become terribly interested in agency. They've got to have some buy-in. They have to see that you don't care about the substance, that you really care about them.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to talk about the process that isn't working. Well, yeah, I know you're trying to fill the hole this way, but it's not working. And they're like, yeah, well then let's talk about other strategy,
Let's do
right?
something else. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
and as we wrap up here, because we're almost out of time, Darren, it's just been lovely talking to you. You are a wealth of information and knowledge. And you're reminding us that addiction, this really is a critical and a chronic illness. It's a brain deficiency, but there's also environmental factors. You have a free gift for us that's more about understanding modern addiction, right?
yeah, lots of those, but I think that we've got to refocus on the human. We just can't keep talking about the external. I think everybody's getting tired of the drug conversation or the substance,
Absolutely.
or yeah, I think we've got to go back and say, this is not as interesting as it may have been. We've got to go back and say, we've got people hurting, we've got people in trouble, we've got people on the edge. Let's figure out who these wonderful people are and help that first before we jam all of this chemical discussion. Otherwise, we lose the human, and they just feel bad and they feel stupid, or they feel
That's what I
shame.
feel like. We have a human deficiency.
Yeah.
And on that note, so we're going to drop Dr. Brooks's Understanding Modern Addiction guide, and that's his free gift. We will drop that. And if everybody can make their way back to the main room in a minute, we will be talking to Daren in a few minutes at the Q&A panel. So please, please, please stick around for that. He is really, really is a wealth of information about just being a good human being and doing that without the use of an escape.
Hey, thanks. Love you.
Yeah.
Thanks for all the work.
Yeah.
And
Love you, Daren. And thank you
yeah,
so much. We'll see you
thank
soon,
thank you
everybody.
too. Appreciate it.